A gute Woche. The Rebbe Zalgazunsan began the Farbrengen this afternoon that we find at the end of this week's Sedra, and as the expression in Chazal is, Hakil hoilech achar hachitum, everything goes after the end. Where the Pasuk tells us about Yaakov, how Yaakov is meeting the Malachim, and he named the place Machanoim, Vayikro Shem HaMokem Ahu Machanoim. And Rashi tells us on behalf of Chazal that there were two groups of Malachim that Yaakov met with here. They were the Malachim of Chutz La'aretz that were together with Yaakov until he would enter Eretz Yisrael. And then they are the Malachim of Eretz Yisrael that came to greet Yaakov upon his entering Eretz Yisrael. Which this is the Perush which Rashi has chosen to interpret these psukim. So from this we can understand that this is the Perush, this interpretation is the closest to Pshutei Shel Mikra, to the simple meaning of the pasuk. Even though there are other explanations in this pasuk as well, and there are hardships in this commentary which Rashi gives, but nonetheless Rashi has chosen this explanation and not any of the others, because this one is the closest to Pshat. We know what Chazal tell us, the Rebbe continues, that Maisei Ovois, Simen Labanim, and especially when we're talking about an act that happened to the most chosen of the Ovis, Yaakov, who was the B'chir Sheba Ovis, so we have to say that this has to reflect the Avodah of each and every Yid. And the lesson which we derive from this, that a Yid has to know that when a Yid arrives to a place, he becomes the balabas on this place, he becomes the full authority on this place, to the extent that he is the one that gives it the name. Just like we find here by Yaakov, that Yaakov named this place Machanoim. And the inyan of Machanoim is Neshama and Guf. Because Neshama and Guf, this is the same idea as Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Eretz Yisrael is an inyan of Ruchnias. That relates to the Neshama. However, Chutz La'aretz corresponds to the Guf. And the Yid has to know that his mission is to be effective in both of these machanois. He has to be effective as far as the Guf and as far as the Neshama. And as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, what the Guf is. And it's required an Avodah. Avodah is required to purify the Guf. And it is brought out in Chassidus that Avodah relates to the expression of Ibud Oiros. We find when we have to work out a piece of skin from a behemoth, that is where the expression of Avodah is used, Ibud Oiros. This inyan of working on skin and working it out, this is something which the Gemara says that a person who does this occupation, he is not suitable to be a chaver in a bezdin. Why? Because it's a very low-end occupation. But on the other hand, we say that in Ruchnias, each and every Jew has to do and is compelled to do this avodah to work out his guf. This is what Alter Rebbe explains in Torah and Parshas Mishpatim, relating the pasuk Sheish Shonim Yavoid, that every Yid has to know that his avodah is. He has an avodah of Sheish Shonim Yavoid, and that is the avodah which is with the Gashmias and with the Guf, and it is with the Guf and through the Guf that he has to do this avodah. And it's same idea is also what the Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah in the beginning of Parshas Bahar, where the Torah begins Ki Savayu al Haaretz V'Shav Sa'aretz Shabbos L'Shem. The Torah tells us about the halachas of Shemitah. So the Torah says that when we will enter Eretz Yisrael, the earth will have a year of rest. So the question arises, that is not the first thing that comes. First, we have to work 6 years. After working 6 years, then is the year of Shabbos L'Shem. And the pasuk says different. The pasuk starts off, Ki Savayu al Haaretz, and right away, upon entering Eretz Yisrael, V'Shav Sa'aretz Shabbos L'Shem. So the interpretation that is given in this, that a Yid has to know, upon entering Eretz Yisrael, he is going to have to work 6 years in order to come to the year of Shemitah, to the year of Shabbos L'Shem. But he has to know that what is the ultimate goal in his avodah of the Sheish Shonim, to reach to the level of a Shav Sa'aretz Shabbos L'Shem. And here the Rebbe continued, this is also what Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya and Perik Tesvav, where Alter Rebbe brings out that, based on what the Gemara says, who is called an Oivei Delakim, who is called one who is serving God, and who is called Lo Yavodai, not serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Gemara says that if one learns and reviews an Inyan and Torah only 100 times, he is called Lo Yavodai, he's not serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, the one who is reviewing it 101 times, he is called an Oivei Delakim. Consider that he is presently serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is the explanation in this? So Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya as follows. The one that learns 100 times, in those days they would learn things orally. So in order to make sure that they would remember it, they have it into their minds, everybody would review it 100 times. Reviewing 100 times, this would be the custom that everybody would do. So as long as he's doing what the routine is, he cannot be considered somebody who's serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Once he is going above and beyond the routine, everybody is reviewing 100 times, and he is reviewing 101 times, then he already can be considered an Oivei Delakim. So imagine, we're talking about a person who has learned an Inyan and Torah 100 times. And he's all day, what is he doing? He's learning Torah. Because when he's finishing learning 100 times, what does he do? He doesn't stop learning. Then he goes on to the next Inyan, and he's learning the next Inyan 100 times. And why are they learning 100 times, as mentioned earlier? Because by learning this amount of times, this gets it really into his memory, gets it into his mind properly. So we say, being that he's doing it based on a habit, which this is how everybody is doing it, he's not considered an Oivei Delakim. When is he considered an Oivei Delakim? That he's presently serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is when he has gone above his regular routine and he studied 101 times. Even though learning Torah 100 times is also not simple. And that is why we find that there are severe punishments on Bittul Torah. As the Alter Rebbe also brings that in Tanya, because it's only once a person realizes these great oinshim, that's what's holding him back from Bittul Torah. Because learning in itself, even 100 times, is not easy. But nonetheless, 101 times when he's learning, then he's considered an Oivei Delakim. This is also what we are now entering the month of Kislev. The month of Kislev is the third of months when we count from Tishrei. So it corresponds to Sivan, which is also the third of months when we count from Nisan, the month of Matan Torah. So we say that Kislev is also actually a month of Torah, just like Sivan is. And why do we have to stress in the Avodah in the month of Kislev? What is required in the month of Kislev? The emphasis that we should go out of the level of reviewing 100 times and going into the level of 101 times. In other words, going out of the routine and going into a level which is considered Oivei Delakim. And especially now that we are already a week into the month of Kislev. We're already 7 days in the month of Kislev. And 7 days, that is a complete cycle. From after 7, we already come to 8, which is already higher madrege. But being that we're already 7 days, that means we're already into the Avodah of Kislev, sign the learning of Torah of Kislev, aside the union of Pnimis HaTorah, which is something which is emphasized strongly in the month of Kislev, as well as the union of Afatzas HaMayonos. This is also brought out in the Yontif which we have in Kislev. In the Yontif of Kislev we have Chanukah. What is the idea of Chanukah? The idea of Chanukah is also that every night we increase. We increase with one more lichtel more than we did the night before. In other words, we cannot satisfy ourselves at the level we stood at the previous night, and we have to keep on going higher. So actually, this is also bringing out the same idea, how we cannot remain at the level of reviewing 100 times, but we have to come on to the level of 101 times. Because when it comes to Chanukah, we know, when the Gemara discusses the halacha of Chanukah, actually me'ikar hadin, originally it would be sufficient that everybody should only light one candle. However, the Gemara describes it is the mehadrin min ha-mehadrin, those that really want to do it in a perfect way. They are those that increase every night. But the Ramah writes, and it is known, that the Ramah is a person who is an authority by Yidden. And it is related to the Pasuk. Pasuk says in Chumash and Pashas B'Shalach, Uvnei Yisrael yoitzim biyod Ramah. So there are those that say, biyod Ramah means the Ramah, that Yidden are going according to the psukim of the Ramah. So the Ramah writes that when it comes to Chanukah, everybody follows this path of Mahadrin min ha-Mahadrin. And in the avodah of Mahadrin min ha-Mahadrin, every Yid is bringing out the advantage of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way which is considered Oved Elokim. And when is he considered an Oved Elokim? When he goes above the regular routine, above the regular nature. And this is also that in the month of Kislev, we have the Yontiv of Yutes Kislev, which Yutes Kislev is the time when Chassidus began to be spread in a very strong and forceful way, the whole idea of Afatzas HaMayonis. And what is the whole meaning of Chassidus? The whole meaning of Chassidus is also Lifnim Mishuras Adin, more than the requirement of Halacha. And when we're saying Lifnim Mishuras Adin, it brings out the same idea. It's the idea of 101. And just like this is in learning of Chassidus, the same thing is also in the Hafatzas HaMayonis, in spreading Chassidus. Which, as mentioned earlier, when did all of this begin in a most strong and forceful way? All of this began right after Yutes Kislev. And the month of Kislev comes out in the winter months. Which winter months? That is the months of rain. And it is through the rain, what rains in the months of Kislev, later this grows, and it grows, and then we bring the karbanos from it. And this is the korban which we bring Memachas HaShabbos right after Pesach, which this permits Chodesh, that we should be able to use the new Tfuah, until we come to the Kutzrechem es Ksiratzachem. When do we cut? And then cut whatever has grown from this rain which has begun in Kislev. That happens when we celebrate Shavuos, and then we bring the Shtei Alechem. This also relates to the idea of Temchet Mimim. Which Temchet Mimim, as there's the famous Sikha from the Rebbe Rashab, which he spoke on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, then, there's always a Farbrengen. It's no question. Simchas Torah is a time for a Chassidische Farbrengen. And then he brought out the idea of Temchet Mimim, that here the Talmidim learn Torahs Hashem Tmima. They learn both parts of Torah. Sai Nigla the Torah and Sai Pnimi Yisa Torah. And then we fulfill the concept of Machanoim, two camps, which is, as mentioned earlier, this is Sai the Avodah which relates to the Guf, and as well as the Avodah which relates to the Neshama. And Maaseh Yavis, Simin Labanim. And as the Rebbe always brings out, and I brought it out today as well, what's that Taich Simin? Simin we could say two ways. There's an inyan of a simin when you use a simin as a means of identification. Pshat, if somebody lost something and he will give you a simin, with this simin we identify the lost object. However, there's a deeper idea of a simin. There's a simin where the simin creates the entire concept. And that is the simanim which we have by kashrus. When is a behemoth considered a kosher behemoth? When the behemoth is malas geira and mafresas parsa. These, it's also simanim, but these simanim create the kashrus. So when a behemoth has these two things, choose a cud and has split hoofs, this is an indication, and this makes the behemoth for a kosher behemoth. What is the inyan and ruchnius of both of these simanim? So the Rebbe as follows. Before he starts to eat something, what's the idea of eating? Eating is the idea, it becomes part of him. Damu basar kipsar, it becomes part of his blood and his flesh. And it has to go through the birurim, purifying, in order that it should be able to become part of his flesh. So we say that it is not sufficient that it should have one birur being purified once, it has to be chewed again and again. And that's the inyan of malas geira. What is the idea of a mafresas parsa of a split hoof? That when a Yid goes someplace, a Yid has to know right away that it's a double step that he's taking. Each step is a double step. As the Rebbe spoke last week, regarding Vayetze Lecha, Vayetze Lecha Elokim, which was in last week's Sedra. So the question arises, which Rashi asks, why does the pasuk use the expression Vayetze Lecha? Proper expression should have been Yitain. Why Vayetze? That a Yid has to know right away that whatever he does, he will have to do it again. Rebbe spoke it last week, more specific regarding shluchim, that a shliach has to know that when he does something, it's not just that he did something one-time thing. What he started to do, he will have to repeat. He will have to do what he did one inyan, he'll have to do another inyan, and a third inyan, and so forth. Yitain, v'yachso v'yitain. And this is what the Rebbe is bringing out here. That a Yid always has to know that when he's going, each step he's taking, it is right away a double step. It's not going to be something where he's stopping. Right away, it's required from him to continue again and again. And from this Sedra, we come to the next Sedra, which we will be learning today by Mincha, which begins with Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim, that Yaakov sent Malachim to Esav. And it's explained, what does it mean that Yaakov sent Malachim to Esav? Because Yaakov was at such a high level that he already thought that Esav is already also ready. He should meet with him, and being of a level which Yaakov thought he's at. However, when will this revelation be? This revelation will be when Mashiach will come, as the Rambam writes at the end of his Sefer, that then it will be a time that amongst all the nations there will be Safa Brucha, a clear language, and Shecha Mecha, they will be united in one shoulder, all to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this lesson of Chodesh Kislev, which we are talking about, which is bringing out the idea how everybody has to strive to serve the Rebishter in the level of Oved Elokim, which has brought out the idea of 101. In other words, doing more than our regular routine, especially this year. That this year we have gone through already the avodah of previous years. The year before that was a year of Tehei Shnas Nisim, and before that we had the year of Tashmit Yedecha, and before that we had the year of Shnas Tismach and Tesamach, and now we are coming to the year of Tehei Shnas Arenu Niflois. So it's definitely so that what type of avodah is demanded from us this year, not the avodah in the sense of 100 times reviewing, that is considered lei avodah. What is demanded from us now is the avodah of 101, which that is considered to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this avodah should involve everybody, men, women, and children, just like we find by Chanukah. Chanukah involves everybody. The men light the Chanukah licht. Not only do the men light the Chanukah licht, the children also light the Chanukah licht. The young boys light the Chanukah licht. However, as far as girls lighting Chanukah licht, here there are various customs, and by us it's customary being that the women do not light the Chanukah licht. The husband is made to the women. So the same thing. Also, the little girls, we are made to them, and they also are not lighting themselves. And all of this is a preparation for the third Beis HaMikdash. When the third Beis HaMikdash, we will have the inyan of the lighting of the menorah, and we will right away in the Shabbos, we will all join in together and all go to the Gula Shleima, and especially that we are already 7 days, as mentioned earlier, we are already 7 days into the month of Kislev. Even though we will be going out of the Tchum Shabbos, however, Mashiach will come and will take us all, and he will lift us all up, so that we will all be higher than Asara Tvachim. And there's the discussion in Halacha that once it is higher than Asara Tvachim, then there is no inyan of Tchum Shabbos. And getting back to the inyan of Vayishlach, Rashi comments, Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim. So Rashi says, whom did he send? Malachim Mamish. That means he sent Mamish Malachim angels. So apparently, Rashi's inyan is to explain how it is according to Pshat Shel Mikra. The word Malachim is mentioned many times in the Torah. It's mentioned before here, before Parshas Vayishlach, and it's mentioned afterwards. And nonetheless, in all these places, what is the meaning of Malachim? The meaning of Malachim is Shluchim, emissaries. Here we say that Rashi teaches that it does not mean that Yaakov sent emissaries to Esav, but rather it means that Yaakov sent the Malachim. Because as mentioned earlier, Yaakov thought that Esav is already up to the level that he can purify Esav to the highest extent, and that they are ready for a union of Geula. And that is why, whom did Yaakov send to Esav? He sent them Malachim, because Yaakov thought that Esav is already at that level. And as the Rebbe continued, when we're talking about the Inyan of Vayishlach, this Inyan of Vayishlach, this Shliches, really applies to each and every Yid, because each and every Neshama also goes on a mission. The mission is Me'igra Rama Lebeira Amikta, from a very high hill down deep into a very deep ditch. And the goal of this mission is to see to it that this world becomes a place of residence for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And from these psukim, we are refreshing ourselves, we are gaining spirit to be able to fulfill this mission of Shlichus. And especially that recently we had the convention of Shluchim that has taken place here. And this was called a Kinus HaShluchim Oilami, Kinus of Shluchim from all over the world. And the word Oilami doesn't only mean all over the world, it also has the meaning permanent and eternal, which means that the result of this convention will be such that it will bring fruit, it will bear fruit, that the fruit-bearing payers that this will accomplish will be eternal and permanent. And especially referred to it that the sign about the Shluchim's convention is still hanging on the outside, in front of 770. And may all this lead that it should be a Pa'ula Nimshechas, that it should be constant results should be coming out of this convention, and it should lead to it that it will remove the Helem Vehester, the cover-up that the world covers on Getlichkeit and interferes with this world becoming a Dira Lo Yizbarech. Hopefully it will be out of this kinus that it will break up all these cover-ups which are interfering with it, that this world should become a Dira Lo Yizbarech. And everything will be done in the sense of Oved Elokim. Oved Elokim, meaning that constantly, at every moment, he realizes and knows that he is a shliach, and therefore he does what is required from a shliach. And all of this will be done in a way, as we spoke before, in a way of doing it 101 times. In other words, Oved Elokim, constantly knowing and realizing what he has to do and what has to be done. And the Rebbe is concluding that all of this will lead to Geula, that we will all go together to Eretz Yisrael. Even though, says the Rebbe, there is a tumult regarding Yidden and Eretz Yisrael, which is coming from the Goyim. However, to Yidden this has really no meaning. Yidden should ignore this totally. We know what the Yalkut Shimoni tells us, the Medrash tells us, that before the Gula, Mashiach will come, and he will proclaim to the Yidden that it has come the time that we should go out of Golas, and right away we will have the Geula through Mashiach Tzidkenu. Then the Rebbe said that there are guests here that came from Montreal. Let them all say L'chaim, and let them sing a Freiliche Nigen, and together with them, we will all go together to Eretz Yisrael. In other words, they will not have to go home. We will save them a trip. And from here, we will go together with them, joining them. They will be joining with us, that we will all go together to Eretz Yisrael, to the Indian of Geula. The Rebbe afterwards began to sing his father's nigun, Hakafis nigun of his father. Then the Rebbe continued that those that have submitted mashke should come up and announce it, and when mehem yiru v'chein yasu rabim, in other words, people will see the good things that these people have submitted mashke for. They're announcing these worthwhile causes, whatever the mashke is for. So others will also do the same. The main thing is that everything should lead to resolutions b'poyel. And when we're talking about increasing in resolutions, says the Rebbe here, we're not over on a isser of Bal Tosef. We know that in mitzvahs, we're not allowed to increase on mitzvahs. For example, if we're required to put on 4 tzitzis on a garment, one is not allowed to put on 5 tzitzis on a garment. However, to increase in good decisions, here we will not be over, we will not be transgressing this concept of Bal Tosef. And this should lead to kviyas b'Torah, kviyasitim b'Torah. And when it becomes a kviyas, it is not only a kviyas, a set time when we learn Torah, but it becomes a kviyas, a set into the person, that the person knows that it has to be part of him, that this and this time has to be set aside to the learning of Torah. And all of this is a proper preparation for the geula nitzchis, for an eternal geula. A geula which will come in a permanent way, and the binyan of the Beis HaMikdash which will be a permanent structure, until we will be able to be makriv the korbanos there through Moshe and Aaron, and will be kitzav v'ranan u'sheichnu yofer, and everybody will come, Moshe, Aaron, and all the rabbeim, and all of us will continue in an arichas yomim v'shanim tovos, and be able to continue the avodah in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim, in the Beis HaMikdash. A gute Woche.